Hello. Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome. As always, thanks very much for being here and being part of this community. So I'm Matt Turck from FirstMark Capital. Thanks to Bloomberg, our host, for once again hosting us in this superb venue. And after a little bit of trials and tribulations and some back and forth on the speakers, we're actually ending up with a fantastic lineup tonight, which is very data science heavy. So those are the people, and they're going to be speaking pretty much in this order. We're going to start with Jake Klamka, who runs a very interesting program which helps quant PhDs, so math, physics, science PhDs become data scientists. And then we have Jesse from Newton, which is one of the FirstMark portfolio companies in full disclosure, who I think runs the largest data science team in New York, as far as I know. Okay. And then Sean, who's, I think, the second returning speaker. So we've been doing this for 2 years, and I think Sean is the only the second person that's coming back. Then I'm going to do a fireside chat with Riley, who heads up data science at Airbnb. Very excited about that. And then we're going to close with Chris, who's the head of the AT&T Big Data Lab and a former Netflix prize winner. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Jake, take it away.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Matt. So I'm going to start off. Get this. Is this the? You just saw my slides. So I'm going to just start off to give you just for brief context, tell you about Insight and the program we've been running out in Silicon Valley for a couple of years now. But really, that's just an excuse to get to the kind of meat of it, which is I'm hoping to tell you about the lessons we've learned helping close to 100 PhDs now transition from academia to industry as data scientists. And hopefully those are lessons that you can take away to help hire data scientists, help onboard data scientists, and generally try to select people a bit better when trying to bring new members onto your data teams. So just a bit of background about myself. I made this transition on myself. I worked on the Large Hadron Collider at the University of Toronto, looking for the Higgs boson, although briefly, before I decided that, you know what, this stuff I've been reading about in Wired magazine and on Hacker News and on TechCrunch was a little bit more exciting and interesting to me, and the impact I was seeing there was just really spectacular. So I kind of took the exit ramp, had all these great skills coming out of physics that I thought I would leverage. I'd programmed every day while doing my physics research, worked with big data essentially, done a lot of machine learning. So I thought I was pretty much ready to go. And then I sort of hit a bit of a brick wall. I sort of didn't quite know what to do next. All my friends were from academia. I was kind of in this science bubble. All I had ever thought about was being a physicist, and it wasn't really clear what the next steps were. Eventually packed a bag after, I think, a little bit too long, moved to Silicon Valley, got into Y Combinator, which is a great startup accelerator program, and that really kind of opened the doors for me. But these little arrows here took 2 or 3 years of sort of stumbling around to figure it out. And I'm sort of not the only one. There's a lot of academics trying to make this transition now. A lot of my friends started calling me up, asking how they can make this transition from physics, math, other fields. A lot of the underlying sort of reasons are that the amount of PhDs granted keeps going up, but the amount of faculty positions has been flat. And so there aren't a lot of jobs. But even more importantly, actually, I think a lot of people are just like me, are just really attracted to the impact that they could make using the skills that they have in industry, in high-tech fields. And unlike that flat faculty job graph, as you all know, the demand for data scientists and analytics professionals keeps going up, and this trend has continued, even though this graph is pretty old. So it's a problem I had. It's a problem my friends were having. I thought, let's try to solve this. And so started the Insight Data Science Fellows Program, which is a 6-week postdoctoral training fellowship. We're an education startup, a professional education startup. The goal is to take people who are already 95% of the way there, have spent years of their life working with data, programming, doing all the things data scientists do, and just fill in that last 5 or 10% that's going to get them transition from from academia to industry. So it's, like I said, it started in June 2012. We have 3 sessions per year. And so we just actually are wrapping up our 6th session. Everybody's interviewing right now. And we're now at about 25 PhDs per session. And the applicant pool is definitely, word's gotten out. We've got 100% placement. So we're getting close to 500 applications per session now. So it's getting pretty competitive. And really briefly about the program structure, I can talk at length about this because we've been really iterating on it for about 6 sessions now. But it's really fundamentally around the idea of these are all people who learn incredibly well already, so there's no formalized training. It's all about actually doing data science. So they're actually, for the first 4 weeks of the program, working on data projects. Mentors are coming in who are data scientists from various companies to have roundtable discussions with them, kind of teach them the language, talk about tools, talk about best practices. So Riley, who's here today, actually was one of the earliest supporters and mentors of the program. He's hired 2 fellows and has come in since the first session and been a huge help. So people like him from the data community in the Valley have been coming in and help kind of make that transition. Then in weeks 5 and 6, they take their projects, they go out and they demo at companies, and now data scientists and hiring managers are no longer just looking at like an academic CV. They're actually looking at almost like a portfolio piece of what these people are capable of. And the data projects are kind of tuned. They're not focused on science now, but they're focused on sort of topics that are relevant to, in this case, internet companies. And so we're at 70 Insight Fellows working at as data scientists now in Silicon Valley. Soon to be 100 once all of these fellows go through the interview process. They work at these companies plus about 40 different companies. We've got about 15 at Facebook, half a dozen at Yammer, at Microsoft, half a dozen at Square, 2 at Airbnb. All these other companies have multiple fellows working at them. And here's the most recent group. So one of the things that sort of emerged from running this program, apart from just getting the actual mechanics and the mechanism of this transition right and the education right, is that this community is emerging. And this is actually becoming one of the most exciting parts, I think, of it. The fellows go out, they have beer together, they exchange information. And because it's such a fast-moving field, you learn a ton just from other colleagues who are doing other things at companies. One fellow who's been on the job about 6 months came back, and they all come back to sort of mentor the next session, and it's this really nice virtuous cycle. And he said to me, it's really cool because of Insight, I have more connections in data science than my boss, which is pretty cool 6 months out on the job. And I think the companies benefit from that. So that's the context. That's sort of where we've been at over the last couple of years. And so essentially what we've been doing the whole time is making this picture happen. It takes the before picture is we start with quantitative scientists, fill in some gaps, kind of like a finishing line of education, and then the after picture is they become a data scientist on a data team. And so I want to take the experience we've had from doing this close to 100 times for 100 people now, and try to hopefully give you some tips that will help you in sort of finding data scientists, particularly if they're coming from academia, entry-level data scientists. So let's start, number 1, with the end in sight. So let's talk about the end picture. So where are these people headed? They're heading to most likely a data science or an analytics team. And data science is sort of an umbrella term. And so early on when we were getting started with Insight, I talked to data scientists, and it'd be really hard to pin down what do they do. Do you focus more on this or that? And it's we kind of focus on everything. Okay. But a kind of a picture has emerged now over the last couple of years, and we've seen it from a high level. And it sort of breaks down into about 3 broad categories, the type of work that data teams do. And so that is either sort of in the realm of what I call like sort of product analytics or like business analytics, where you're looking really for people who have a really strong skill set in asking questions and being curious and exploring data and finding sort of statistical significance in various trends. And they're doing that work in order to help their company or their team optimize certain metrics like engagement or revenue. And then they have to be very, very strong communicators, because then they're taking those insights that they find, and their sort of customers are the internal teams, the product managers, the engineers, who are then going to take whatever they found, the insights they found, and turn them into actual products. The next big one is sort of predictive modeling, and we see this in particular with risk teams. So the Square risk team, for instance, has hired about 7 fellows. A lot of them work in sort of the risk area. And these are people with very strong sort of machine learning and statistical modeling backgrounds. They're people who are really driven and motivated by optimizing a certain number and like for instance, your fraud rate and making it go down. And here, the sort of the real skill set needs to be machine learning, statistical analysis experience, and really that drive to kind of hammer at a goal and try to figure out whether you're hitting it. And lastly, data products, it's teams who are doing statistical analysis, working with data, creating algorithms, but the end user, the end customer is actually the user of the website. So think something like people you may know on Facebook or jobs you might be interested in on LinkedIn. The actual sort of end user is the actual user on the website. And so these people, they have to have all those skills, a lot of the same sort of skills in machine learning, but they also need to have enough sort of software engineering savvy to be able to push code onto the live onto the site. And the reason this is really relevant for any of you who are hiring data scientists either directly as a hiring manager or onto your team is it's really important to get clear on which one of these buckets you predominantly fit in, or which one of these the role that you're hiring for is going to be for. Because the number one thing we hear from the PhDs in our program when considering companies or who to talk to is, they say, I get what the company's doing at a high level. I get that the data is interesting, but what am I going to be doing? What am I specifically going to be doing if I take this job? And by getting really clear on which one of these three categories you fit in, and then articulating that throughout the process of whether it's in your job description, whether it's through the interview process, or whether you're trying to sell that candidate on to join the team, that's going to be really help to clarify for them whether it's a fit or not. It'll help to attract the right people to you, and also, frankly, weed out the ones that might not be a fit. So that's my main tip there, is get clear on which of these categories you're going to try to communicate that throughout the hiring process to attract the right people. Next, going back to the sort of the before picture, who are these people? Who are these sort of academics that you could be, the talent pool that you could be looking into to bring onto your team as data scientists? So I don't have the global data set, but I do have our source of 100 fellows who have been from about 35 institutions over 5 countries. And so what we've seen is it's about, it's 60-40, but it's pretty much half and half people from PhDs and others who have gone from a PhD, done a postdoctoral fellowship, and then are moving into industry. And from what we can see, it's all about the skills. It's not about which one of these two buckets they fit in. Similarly, there's a really big cross-section of different backgrounds. I mean, physics and astronomy is pretty heavy. Maybe I'm just biased because I'm a physicist, but we've seen people from all different areas. And so the real takeaway here, and what we've seen, there's no kind of specific trend around if you're a physicist, you must be good at this, or if you're a quantitative social scientist, you must be good at that. It really varies from sort of research group to research group, and really depends on the individual. So the real sort of takeaway here from those 2 slides, I think, and the tip I have for you is, don't focus too heavily on what it says on the resume in terms of their background. Really talk to them about the underlying skill sets that they gained, and try to see whether they fit into one of those previous categories that your team is working with. And try to kind of dig through that sort of first veil of the background they're coming from, because you can really find a gem in almost any one of these backgrounds. And the last sort of third point, so you have the sort of before picture and the after picture of the data science, and you have this transition, and this is really the space that we work in. And this gap is, it turns out none of this stuff takes years for a data scientist to learn, but there is a lot of different things to pick up. And I'll just go over it really quick. So first of all, the tool set is often different. Scientists are often coming with like MATLAB experience, for instance, and they've never used something like Python or R, for instance. So at Insight, that's a big part of what they do. It doesn't take years to learn that if you're coming from a PhD program, but it does take a week or two, and you need to kind of really go at it pretty hard. So that's one big gap that needs to be filled in the tool set. A lot of scientists also never use databases. They do incredibly sophisticated algorithms, do incredible things, store everything in a flat file. So that's obviously not going to work in industry. Context is different, obviously. I mean, if you're looking at astrophysics data, it's pretty different than say, social data or web data. So the context needs to be switched. They need to get immersed in the underlying sort of business or product. Next, the language. This is huge. So much of, you don't even notice it, so much of when you judge whether someone is good or not is actually you're just judging them on whether they're using kind of the right language. And so it is part of the prerogative of the person interviewing to learn that language, but also sort of invite all of you to be aware of that when you're interviewing and try to figure out whether does this person really not understand what we're doing here, or are they just using different language that maybe they're bringing from academia to describe this. The pace is much different. So this is part of why the program, why Insight's 6 weeks, is to sort of like throw the fellows into deep water and then see if they can swim. Because in academia, the time scales are much longer. Your goal is to go get everything 100% right and then publish. And if that takes a couple of years, then you take a couple of years. In our industry, in industry, clearly that's not going to work. You want to probably get to like 80% and then kind of like look around and see whether like you should move on to something else. So that's a big part of filling that gap, switching that focus. And obviously the priorities are very different. So the ROI, what you choose to work on. So these are all the things that sort of we try to address through the program. But what you can do, I think, when hiring to kind of, if you're cognizant of these gaps, you can try to adjust your interview process, for instance, to try to see how quickly the candidate can actually fill those gaps, even in your interview process. So a really kind of cool model I've seen is actually using data challenges and like kind of take-home data challenges, or where you actually provide a little bit of context and say, hey, use Python, use these tools, answer this question. And I've heard stories where a candidate is coming from, say, physics, only use MATLAB, but hey, they got a data challenge and they told them to use Python, so that person learned Python in 24 hours and did the data challenge. Pretty strong signal that they might be, are they 100% of the way across that gap after that? No, but you've got a pretty strong indication if they were able to do that they're going to be pretty quick learners and they might be able to join your team. So the takeaway from this is adjust your if at all possible, try to think of ways to adjust your hiring process to test for how quickly they're able to kind of traverse this gap. Kind of get 2 data points basically and see how quickly they're moving along instead of just kind of testing where are they right now as a snapshot. And that's where I'll leave it off. So the 3 tips, like I said, is sort of clearly communicate what your team is working on to attract the right candidates. Don't be biased too much on background. Look for underlying skill, and then try to test for how quickly people learn, so that you can actually see if a candidate is able to bridge the gap really quickly. And I'll just leave off to mention that we've definitely grown. We're trying to help more PhDs kind of make this transition. And so this summer we're actually launching our first session of the Insight Data Science Fellows Program in New York. And so it's going to be the exact same model that we've worked on for a couple of years in the Valley, but we're going to have mentors coming in from various companies here in New York and from Boston. Here's some of the ones we've signed up already, and hopefully more soon. And then we're already accepting applications from PhDs who essentially say to me, like, I love everything about this transition except the part that requires me to move to California. So that's no longer required. They can stay right here on the East Coast. And that'll be this summer. If you have any questions or want to get in touch, just jake@insightdatascience.com or info@insightdatascience.com. But thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Good. Thank you. Okay, we're just going to take a few questions. Actually, I'll start with one quickly, and not necessarily from your perspective as running this program, but from an employer's perspective.
Yeah.
If you take one of those folks that spend a number of years learning physics, and to the extent that you need to retrain them, is there a real difference in terms of quality between a PhD student that has gone through the entire process and completed his or her PhD and a master's student? Do those 3 years add something to the mix, or however many years?
From what I've seen, yes. And I'm biased because I'm working with a bunch of PhDs, but in speaking with a lot of hiring managers, the answer I've heard is yes. And the reason is that underlying skill set of, in data science, you often don't know what questions to ask. And being creative around asking questions and knowing whether you've hit a right answer is something that is hard to learn in courses, which is at the master's level, the only thing you've been doing is courses and sort of homework sets. And the real way you learn that is through experience. And there's nothing that teaches you how to do that well than not graduating unless you find that insight in the data of your physics experiment. So,
fair enough.
Yes.
Hold on. Sorry, Courtney. We have a gentleman with a mic. If you could start with your name and company, please.
Yep. So my name is Michael Katai. I work at IBM. So I know that you work almost exclusively with people in the data science world. But I guess I was just wondering if you've heard stuff in the Valley or stuff out here about companies looking for PhDs or people with extensive academic backgrounds in areas that may not be so data heavy. So I'm thinking sociologists, journalism, writing, economists, not so much on the quantitative side, although there may not be.
You mean those people coming from academia in those categories, or companies hiring in those categories?
Companies hiring for, I guess, non-data exclusive.
Right.
style thing.
So honestly, we've really focused. It's been a kind of a lot of learning on our end in trying to iterate the process and kind of getting the educational model right to really filling these gaps over 6 sessions. So we kind of had our hands full. So I actually haven't had a lot of time to see what other sort of opportunities are there for PhDs in those domains. It'd be interesting. One thing that is clearly happening is, it's clearly been weighted towards tech companies. But I'm seeing, whereas a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, people were talking a lot about data science spreading to other industries. Now, we're seeing that happen. We're getting inbound from Fortune 500 companies, from companies and organizations in energy, education, government, you name it. And so that's, I think, going to be an exciting thing to see when the fellows spread out to other industries.
One more. And for what it's worth, we had one of the guests, one of the speakers at one of the earlier events, Drew Conway, had a whole spiel around social science PhDs getting into data science. The video is online on our sort of YouTube channel.
And Drew's going to be a mentor at Insight in New York, so we'll definitely ask him when he comes in. There's some interesting opportunities.
Yeah. So Courtney Benson, SAP. In the time you've had time to assess, what mistakes are corporations making when they look to hire data scientists?
Great question. And so again, this is biased predominantly towards sort of tech companies, but I think the biggest one is actually interviewing them as if they were software engineers. And so in particular, the fellows, when they graduate the program, go into interviews, and a big portion, and sometimes even the large majority of those interviews at most companies for data scientist roles are nevertheless sort of whiteboard coding interviews that are essentially testing like computer science 101 skills, like algorithms and data structures. And I'm not saying those aren't important. They are, and they should be picked up, but they're almost used by companies as like intelligence tests. Are you smart? Where smart means, do you know computer science fundamentals? And the answer is, yes, they are smart, but no, they didn't study computer science, and therefore this is very foreign territory. And so, as we go, the program is focused on just doing great data science, but as we go into those last sort of those interviews, people start kind of prepping for those interviews. But really, sometimes it almost feels like it's kind of like the SAT, like you're just trying to study to pass that test, because a lot of the work afterwards as a data scientist is not really about coding up, heap sort on the whiteboard, and so. That's one thing I think that if I had advice for hiring managers, would like slant the interview process to be more reflective of what a data scientist actually does, as opposed to just kind of use the same process you would for software engineers.
Time for one question. One last question. Okay, I'll just a hand over there. No, otherwise.
Hi, thanks. Ray Prisman here at Bloomberg. I just wanted to push you a little bit on your idea that another mistake companies make is not identifying exactly where the data scientists are going to be adding value. It seems to me, especially because there's a lot of talk about how the whole field of data science is a little bit vague right now. No one knows exactly what it means. Part of the value your graduates could add would be looking at the big picture and saying, look, here's where I could add value, here's what I could be doing.
Yeah, and so it's definitely a balance. So my experience, I'm not saying that you need to get super detailed, precise, and say for the next 5 years this is the only thing you're going to be doing. But what I've basically seen is a little bit too much in the other extreme, where which one are you going to be doing? Well, you'll do this and that and the other, and they don't have a concrete idea. So I think that the point is not so much to pigeonhole people, because most people with these backgrounds are really can really do a diverse number of things, but almost more just get a picture of what are you going to be doing in the first 6 months, just to give people a really concrete idea of the specific projects they'll work on. And I think the best way actually is not even to say for sure it's going to be in this category forever, but actually just come up with very specific examples of stuff they can work on, and that really helps to get them excited, to get them comfortable about, it makes sense to join this company. Because that's really one of the biggest fears that I talk to fellows is like, I know the company's good, I know the data's interesting, but like, what am I going to be doing, and what does that look like? And so it just gives them more comfort.
Okay, great. Well, we're very excited that you're starting this in New York. I think that's going to be terrific for the New York data science community. And thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks, Matt.